Welcome everybody. Welcome to another tutorial from Organian's Puzzle Box. In today's episode, I will show you how to take off and land a ship in space or on land. It doesn't really matter. The setup goes through it all, and I believe you will leave this tutorial with a vast amount of knowledge. For me, this system was very important that it functions with physics enabled. So everything that you're seeing in here is physics driven. That means that we're simulating physics. We've got gravity, we've got inertia pulling at the ship. Now, the way this is structured is in the first phase of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to possess and repossess your actor. So you're possessing the ship and then you're possessing the actor. And in the second phase, I'm going to show you how to take off and land the ship. And in the third stage, we're going to do a bit of refinement to it. So that way, you're very much aware of how this functions. Very extremely important point is that you follow my previous tutorial on how to create a system to fly a ship. This tutorial is heavily reliant on that tutorial because it's basically a continuation. We are adding the system to take off and land to that. But all in all, this entire system does function. The landing and the taking off and the landing functions without that system, but you won't be able to move in space. So that's why I recommend you watching that tutorial. But if you're just interested in the portion of taking off and landing, then just watch this tutorial and this will help you to achieve that effect. And also it will help you to possess and as I said, enter the ship and then to get out of the ship as well. This tutorial will be a 3-part video. Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Then at the end of the month of January, I will do another prize draw. So whoever comments and subscribes to the channel will be part of that draw. In the last video, Damian Ramirez was the one who won who won all my projects. So congratulations to him. I've got myself an open scene. It's an Unreal Engine 5.1. This works in any Unreal Engine from 4.26, I believe, onwards. So you should be okay in any engine you want to make this. What I want to do first is I want to open my content browser, and then I want to go to the add button over here and select add feature or content pack. And in here we can select what type of what we want, and I can select the first person. And then I'm going to click add the project, and after just a brief amount of time, the entire content for this will be added. So then we actually have a character player that we can use in the project. So I believe this has now been added, and you'll see a new folder has been created. So the one that I want to look at is the first person, and obviously we want to set up the ability to be able to possess a ship and then be able to go back to our character. So in here we have a blueprint, which is the blueprint first person character. We want to double click that, but as you can see, there's also a blueprint first person game mode. So what I would suggest you do in the world settings, you've got an option in here where it says select game mode game mode override. You can drop that down and select a first person game mode, which will then load the first person template. So if you press play now, you'll be able to move around with the first person character, as you can see. Now that we've set up the first person character, I would like us to go over into our content folder. Actually, I'm going to do it over here where I have the blueprint. I'm going to right click and then create a new blueprint class. And I'm going to make sure I'm going to select pawn. And I'm going to call that BP underscore ship in this particular case. And that's going to create our blueprint that we're going to sort of reference into the first person character. So if we double click both of these, we'll be able to open them. So I'm just going to put that over here in the taskbar, and then I'm also going to double click the BP ship, and also I'm going to have that in the, obviously in the taskbar. So the blueprint, this blueprint is empty right now, we've got nothing in it. So what we can do is we can add a static mesh, and I'm going to call that ship. By default it has nothing inside of there, so I just type in a cube, so just so we can get a cube in the scene. This is important because we'll be able to reference the ship, the static mesh called ship. We're going to be able to use that in our blueprint for the first person character. Now, this already comes in with the mapping that it needs to be able to move around, jump and everything. This is the new system from Unreal Engine 5.1. I wouldn't, it doesn't matter even if you're using an older version of Unreal, this will look a bit different, but we're not using any of the parts from here. You just leave all of that as it is in both versions, because we're going to create our own new type of mapping for the possess function. Now we've got the project settings open up here as well. You can see this by going to edit and selecting project settings, and then in the input part in here we can now add some actions or some axes. Now in this particular case, our enter and exit the ship button will be a action. So we are going to press the plus button in here and you'll be able to see it. We'll be able to name this whatever we want. So let's just call it enter exit ship. Okay. Just remember that name because we'll need to call it in our blueprint. And then over in here we can press this button and select which button we want to set up, or we can select it from this drop down. But I'm gonna press this keyboard and then press F on the keyboard. This will then allocate that letter to this particular action. So now back in the first person, we want to execute something whenever we press the button. So I'm going to type in enter exit ship, and you can see that it's already found it. We can select it, and this is the button. So when we press it, something needs to happen, and we won't do anything with the release. We just need it to do something when we press it. So I'm gonna drag from here a pin, and I'm going to put is valid, and then when you do this you get some options, obviously quite a bit of them, but we want to go for this one. Okay, and this is going to allow us to execute something if this if our input object is valid or not for what we're trying to achieve. Now the interesting thing about this is that we can actually pull in our blueprint ship within this blueprint. So if I go over here to the variables and press the plus button, I can type in here, let's say occupied ship. That's what I'm going to call it. And then in here, where it's got the option of what we need that to be, we're going to change that from a boolean to type in actually BP ship, and you can see it now, right? So we've now selected the ship from here. We're now calling it. So I'm going to control left click and drag, so then I can put this into as a as a get occupy ship, and I can then put it in here in the input object. This is very important. You've got to make sure you've got your blueprint ship selected, otherwise this will not work. Now another thing that you want to do is we want to make sure that if I'm going to explain how this functions, but from the is not valid point we want to drag in another pin and type in if, which will then find us a branch, so we can add the branch in there. So I'm going to explain what happens after we set up a few more nodes, just so you can understand the way this is sort of being executed. So we're saying, we're asking, right, when the button is pressed, we're asking if this is valid or not. So we're going to have a condition basically that's going to tell us if we've got if the ship is occupied or not. So at this point we're also going to take the capsule component from the blueprint, control drag it over here. So we're now getting this capsule component, and I want to see if the capsule component of our first person object, of a first person character, is actually overlapping. So we're saying get overlapping actors. Okay, so we're checking if the capsule component of our first person actor is overlapping with the blueprint, the ship effectively, so the blueprint ship that we've created. So we can actually type in here and select it. So this will look to see if this is overlapping the ship. Okay, and now we can see in here we have an array that we need to connect. So we can create a condition out of this array, and also we can cast a function out of the ship as well when we do this. So from this array, I'm going to type in length, and I want to then connect this to the condition, but I can't just, I can connect it directly and do a conversion, but that's not something that I want. I want to right click and then search for a greater sign. So we'll put that in there and then connect the length to the greater sign, leave this to 0 and put this on a condition. And I'm going to explain why we're doing all of this in just a second. Now, over in here, right? We now want to do something with the branch. So if it's false, we do nothing. If it's true, then we need to set the occupied ship. So I'm going to drag another pin and type in set, and I can actually type in set occupied ship like this. Okay, now this is sort of like our point in like a point of an execution actually taking some physical shape. So at this point, we want to make sure that we're casting to the occupied ship. So from the overlapping actors, I'm going to get a get array bounds. Actually, no, sorry, that's not it. Let me just have a look. I need to type in a get, and then just put in here, yeah, get a copy, and then with that we can type in here cast to BP ship. Okay. But as you can see, it's got some execute pins, and we don't want that. But we can actually right click it, and we have an option in here to collapse this into a function. Sorry, not a function. So let's just revert that. No, we've got to convert to a pure cast. So when we do that, we no longer have to execute this. It will just cast. So then we can drag from here and put into our occupied ship over here like this. And now we have the first part of this put together, and I'm gonna go through and explain it as to what exactly we've done. So to be as straightforward as possible here, when we press this button, we are looking at the object. We're setting it as not a valid object because this is a box, collision box from the spaceship that we want to use in here. So when we're overlapping the capsule component with the occupied helicopter's collision box, which we'll create in just a bit. If there is an object in there, if it's larger than 0, which it will be, then the condition is set to true. So then we can execute further into our blueprint. We're also getting that element that we're looking through. We're feeding it through the through the blueprint spaceship. So that's where we're going to create a function of possessing and being able to exit out of the ship as well. So right now at this point, we're just creating the functionality in the first person character to be able to work with that, and we are going to then go a bit further with this, where we can actually look to the, in here, where we're going to set up the rest of the collisions and what's happening whenever we exit the ship as well. Back in Unreal, we want to set the collision of the capsule component, which pretty much generates the collision for the first person character. So we're just going to look at set collision profile name, and then we're going to select that for the capsule component. When we do that, you can see it's already selected the capsule component in here, and we want to give it a collision profile. So for this particular reason, we're going to put it to no collision. Okay, so once we do that, we leave the update overlap ticked on, We're not going to do any other pins, but we do obviously want to execute the enter to the blueprint of the spaceship. Now, we can't see that yet because we haven't yet created it in the spaceship. So in the meantime, so we're stopping here. We can create a duplicate of this particular node setup in here and drag it down because we won't be needing it just yet. What we can do here, just to finish this off in the sense of, you know, before we go to the blueprint ship, we can copy this again and drag it over here and connect them like this. So I'm just going to show you back into the in here what we're doing. So effectively at this point, we've now looked at, you know, whether or not the first person character is overlapping with the box from the ship. If it does, then we are going to trigger this point, which is we're going to set no collision for the capsule component, and we're also updating the overlaps. The reason we're doing that is because if we don't do this, when we put the character inside the ship, we will have major issues because they will collide effectively. So once we set it to no collision, we are then entering the ship, which is what we wanted. But then also when on exit, which is going to be an event that we're going to create, we are setting the collision of the capsule component back to pawn. So let's go into the ship over in here, and now we want to create some functions. So the first function we're going to create is called enter. The second one is going to be called exit, and then we want to also create the event dispatch, which effectively once we press the button to enter or exit, we're going to set up this. We're going to use this dispatch in here as well, where we're going to bind an action to it. So I'm going to call this on exited. Okay, now in here we're going to go to our enter function, as that's the one that we want to set up first. So we've got this node, and we can press the plus button as an input, and we can call in here, we can call it player, and we'll change from boolean to BP first person character. So we've loaded that in there as well, which is great. And now we want to bind an event to our on exited dispatch. So we can pull this pin, type in bind, and then put bind event on exited. Okay, so we wouldn't be able to do this unless we actually would have created it in here, right? So we're binding this event, which we can then call into our first person. You'll see how this connects to itself. Now from here, we can drag this event and then put it in here, and you can see it's created an event for us. Okay, so we can then rename this event delegate to exit. We'll call it exit delegate. Yeah. Now what we're trying to do is we want to set the occupant. So I'm going to type in here. First I need to create the occupant. So I'm going to click the variable, and I'm going to call it occupant. And as you can see, the occupant by default would have been a boolean, but because I've tried to set it up earlier, that's why it's sort of already selecting it. So I'm gonna type in BP first person, and I'm gonna select the first person character again, and I can drag it in here. It was gonna ask me if I want to get it or set it, and I want to set it. So I'm gonna put it like that, and I'm gonna make sure that the player is hooked into the occupant. And the reason for that is because this first person in here, if it's not set up, it won't match, it won't know that it's referencing something from in here. Okay, so we're setting that occupant. We now want to possess, so I'm going to drag from here a new node and call it possess. And if you have the context sensitive on, you won't be able to see what the possess that we need. So just make sure you untick the context sensitive and then select possess. And you see when you do that, it will then ask you, we'll say the target is the controller. It will then, say in here in pawn, you got to hook in there a new node called self, and you're not really, you need to be able to get that. So we'll get that in just a second. But from the occupant in here, we need to get the controller. Let me just type in there, controller. Make sure you click the get sensitive content again, just so you don't get every, a lot of stuff showing up. So we'll just select the get controller for the target is pawn, because we are obviously getting the controller from the ship now. So I'm just gonna put that in there. And then in pawn, we need to make sure that the pawn itself, it's actually itself. So let's just set that up very quickly. We can right click and type in self, but make sure, if you can't see this, get a reference to self, just untick the context sensitive, and you should be able to. So now we're putting the self to the in pawn there. Now we want to attach the first person blueprint to our ship. So I'm gonna drag another pin from here and just call it attach actor to actor, like that. And then in here, the parent actor, we need to make sure that it's self again. I'm just gonna duplicate it and just drag it in here. The target is the occupant, so I'm just gonna drag that in here as well, because we're trying to attach the occupant to the parent actor. We don't need a socket name in here, and then in here where we've got the location rule, just make sure it's set to snap the target, rotation rule, snap the target, and then scale rule, snap the target as well. Now that should be enough for us to be able to get our first person character to be attached to the ship. And now let's just have a look at the exit function. So in the exit function, what we want to do is we want to detach from actor with a target. We won't be able to see the target in here, but we'll have to use the occupant as being the target, because that's what we're trying to. This is the one that we're trying to detach. And we're going to click in here and select keep world for all three of these, so we make sure that it just sort of puts our occupant right beside the ship. Actually, it will put the ship, I'll show you in just a second. So it puts set actor location, so this is where we're setting up the target's location, the occupant. And again, we can duplicate this, drag it here, and we want to set up its new location. So basically this is detaching it, but we do need to sort of also place it somewhere. So we're just gonna get the world location, but as you can see, it's only giving us the world location for the ship or the default scene route. So the location needs to be the box collision that we're using to enter this object. So I'm just gonna press the add button and type in box, and then we can select the box collision. Now the box in the viewport, it's inside this cube, so I'm just gonna make it larger, maybe 20. So now it's engulfing the whole cube. So if I go back into the exit function in here, I will be able to get world location. So let me just type in there, get world location on box. So we now have the location of the box, and we're putting it in there. So the actor, the occupant, will be dropped where the box is. I'm not sure. I mean, in this particular case, it might be actually in the center of the box. So what I can do, maybe move it to the side like that. Yeah, just so we're sure it's not going to overlap with the box. Especially because we're giving it collisions again when it does come out of the ship. Okay, so let's just go back to our exit function in here, and we want to now tell our we want to possess again. So we want to possess our occupant. So in here we're gonna click the possess, and the target, we want to get the controller. So get the controller, and the target is pawn. So the target will be whatever we set in here as the pawn, right? So we're putting that in there, and then for the in pawn, we're going to put our occupant again. So I'm going to break these two, the enter and the exit function, down quickly just so you understand what's going on. So explaining the enter function is when we press the F key, which will then trigger the enter function within this blueprint as well once we set this up, we are binding an event to the on-exit dispatch event. And this is important because this is going to be referenced in the first-person blueprint. So this is sort of looking at the exit delegate, which we're going to use in the other blueprint, right? So what we're doing then is we're setting the occupant in here being the player that we set up in the node and well, you know, in the function. So what we're saying is we want to get the controller for the occupant, right? And we're setting it into the target. The pawn currently is the ship right here. So this is the ship, that's the pawn, but we are replacing that. So this is, we're possessing we're possessing our ship with this blueprint that we're calling. Now in here it says that it's then attaching that occupant, the first person, it's attaching it to the ship, to the self, okay? And then the socket name in here, it's pilot in my case. Now effectively what we're trying to do here is if you have a, let's say you have a first person character or a third, actually mainly like a third person character, and you want to put them somewhere in the ship, then what you'd want to do with that is you need to create a socket into the ship. Now in the project in here, if you go back into your blueprint and you click the ship and you double click the cube, you'll then be able to open the cube like this. Okay, now you have an option here called socket manager, and if you can't see that, just go into window and you'll be able to click the socket manager. In the socket manager, regardless if your ship or whatever mesh has sockets, you'll be able to see them, but if not, you can always add a new socket, and let's call that pilot, for example. Now we can put this socket wherever we want, so let's just say we put it up here like that. Okay, now this is, we're going to save this, and in the blueprint where we had on enter, we had the socket name. If we type in pilot over there, now when we possess the ship, like I told you guys, then your character, the third person or whatever, will be set up on that socket, on that socket itself. So you can then put whatever mesh you want up there depending on whatever was the, you know, the actor in here. So that's kind of how that works. So as I said, just to recap very quickly, the ship is still active, but you know, your ship is obviously inactive at the point when you were entering it. But what you're saying is you want the occupant, the first person blueprint, to be attached to the ship, and then you are now possessing the ship. That's why we're saying, you know, possess target as controller, possess the ship with the ship's controller. And now to finalize this, back into our first person character blueprint, we can go and we can, you know, bring another node in here, and we can type in enter, and enter will be the enter from our blueprint for the ship. So if we can't see it in here, that's fine. We can then just untick the context, and you've got in here enter. Well, that's an input map, so you don't need that. We just need the enter from the ship. Now where is it? Should be able to see it somewhere in here. Incredible. There we go. So enter BP ship. Now here's an interesting thing. If you delete this and compile, this won't work anymore. See that? And that's because that's why we were casting here. Okay, so obviously this will still an error because we haven't yet set up everything in here. But what we're gonna do now is we want to put the occupy ship as a target. I'm just gonna connect that there like that, and then the player is gonna be the self. So I'm just going to search for a reference to self and just drag that in there as well. By the way, you couldn't connect this here if you wouldn't have done all the previous steps. Now we want to then call an event on, we're gonna look for on exited. So you can see in here, I can't really see it. So let me just find this. Actually, it will be on, should be on exit really. I've just realized I haven't actually created it. So let me just right click and then look for add a custom event. And I'm gonna call this on exit. And then I'm going to connect this over into here. Gonna make sure that this collision profile is called pawn, because that's the collision that I want to add when we exit the ship. And then we can see in here I've got a I can drag this node from here, but we can't really see it, and it won't let me just place it in there either, unfortunately. And that is because in the blueprint ship, I do have to actually compile. But as you can see over in here, see for the enter bit, I do have my setup for exit delegate. So I have compiled this now. Let me just go back in here and we can see it now. So I can connect it like that. And I'll be able to compile and then no error. Now let's just see if this works. So we're gonna go into our map and we are going to drag the blueprint ship. Let's just put it up here. So it's a very towering ship, as you can see. And I'm gonna press the play button. And when I press play, I am in the world with my first person character. I am now in here and I'm gonna press F. And as you can see, I'm actually I'm pretty sure I'm at the top of the cube. So let me just press F again and nothing happens. So this isn't working. And the reason this isn't working is because in the blueprint ship, in the event graph, I haven't yet set up our enter and exit button. So I'm going to right click and then enter exit ship. So we've got the input action for that. And then out of the pressed option, I'm going to look for exit. So we're calling that function there. So let's just compile and go back in here and press play and let's see what happens. So I'm in the box. I am now possessing it. And when I press F, I am no longer possessing it. And it sort of pushed me outside and I'm now falling through the world. This is good. This is some really good. Yeah, so it definitely did put me in the center of the box over there. So I'm gonna make some adjustments in here. I'm gonna go to the blueprint ship into the viewport, and I'm going to make this box actually maybe like smaller, so maybe 10, and I'm gonna put it right about here so it's outside the box. Maybe, yeah, I think that will be fine. And then the box itself, I'm probably gonna make it like smaller, so maybe a 0.5 like that. And then in terms of the location of this, I'm just gonna put it like that. Okay, so now as you can see, this is what we've got. Let's just press play again. So I've entered the box and now I've exited the box and it's put me in here, but for some reason I am not getting my controller properly back, so we're gonna have to fix that. One thing that I want to do is I want to add a spring arm so we can have a camera. So I'm just gonna put a spring arm and then do like maybe like 1,000 arm length, and then we'll offset it by maybe about 500. Let's have a look in the viewport. That's how high the camera will be. And then we're gonna add a camera to that. The camera will be attached to the spring arm, so we'll be able to see what the camera sees, which is good. And then in the, with the ship selected, I'm gonna go in here and make sure that I've got this set to physics actor, like that. And I'm gonna compile. Let's go back in here and let's press play again. I'm gonna go to the box, press F, and now I am, as I said, I am now possessing it. Press F again and I'm out of it. But what happens is when I get back into here, I can't actually move, and I can't, it only works if I jump, but then I fall through the world straight away. So what I forgot for the possess to work is in the blueprint for the ship. And here in the exit portion, we've got to add a call on exit. So just search for a call on exited. Once you do that, so we're effectively closing the loop in here. So you can see we've got it here at the end and we've got it here at the front. Yeah, we bind the event at the exit to on exited, and now we're calling it at the end. Once we compile and we press play and we go and possess the box, as you can see, when we press F again, it will unpossess the box and it will give us back control to the first person character. And that's effectively how you do it. So that's it for part 1. So if you want to stay tuned for the next part where we pretty much take off and land, then please go to part 2. If not, then you've now learned how to possess and unpossess a mesh.